Welcome to the Guns and Yoga podcast. My name is Wendy Hummel. Before I get into today's episode, I want to share a story about a 3-day training that I recently attended in June. COPS, which stands for Concerns of Police Survivors, hosted their traumas and law enforcement training in our city, Wichita, Kansas. We were fortunate enough to have this training come to our town, as only 9 cities are selected annually. If you ever get the opportunity to attend, I highly recommend going. The mission of COPS is to support those who have lost a loved one in the line of duty. Part of the training included a survivor panel. The panel was comprised of 4 speakers: a son, a wife, a friend, and a coworker and a father. One of the unique elements of this training is that they work with the local chapters and communities to recruit local speakers who address incidents that those in attendance can relate to. Each speaker's loss had a place in my memory. I remember each incident vividly and had a personal or professional connection to each one. In fact, one of the panel members, Sarah Purcell, is a previous guest on this podcast, and I am now proud to call her my friend. Besides this powerhouse panel, the training covered the importance of having those crucial conversations with loved ones about funeral arrangements, making sure beneficiary paperwork is up to date, and other unpleasant things that most of us really do not want to think about. Which leads me to today's guest, Courtney from Heroes Financial Coaching. I spoke with Courtney earlier this year and liked her instantly. She reached out to me on Instagram and we had numerous conversations since. She is married to a police officer and knows better than anyone what it's like to manage a family on a tight first responder salary. She discusses how she successfully managed to get out of debt and lead her family to financial freedom and build their dream home. She was inspired to help other first responder families do the same and created her coaching business. Courtney's approach is unique in that it's not just about money and numbers. She understands the money mindset, limiting beliefs, and makes sure to encourage her clients and helps them keep accountable while also allowing for a plan that includes having fun. We discuss the importance of having those difficult conversations in the case of your spouse's death, preparing a will, having life insurance, and more. I was one of those people that avoided those conversations. Who wants to think about leaving your family or your spouse dying? I'm embarrassed to admit it, but it wasn't until that I was over 50 years old that my husband and I finally prepared a will. And recently, when he was going in for his surgery, the conversation was brought up again. And when the hospital asked us for a copy of his living will, that was stressful. The night before his surgery, we had a heart-to-heart and we talked about all of the just-in-case scenarios. These are things that my husband and I can definitely do better in with this department, but having that paperwork already prepared was extremely helpful, and I can't recommend this more. None of us want to think about life without our spouse or significant other, and nothing that we can do can ever make it better. But having these things in order ahead of time is one way to offset added stress if something does happen. Some of the things that Courtney and I discuss are the differences between a police and military spouse, the stress that finances can have on a first responder marriage, and the stress and impact a first responder career has not just on the first responders, but on their families. Courtney recounts a time when her husband was working riots and they had their second child during this same time period. She discusses the challenges of navigating the added stressors of the job back then and how having a support network would have been helpful. Courtney has a lot of free content, blog posts, and workshops so that you can check out her website for more details if you're interested, or you can check out her Instagram account to see what she's got to offer. Money is a topic that many couples argue about, and first responder relationships are no different. It's common to hear of multiple part-time jobs just to pay the bills, and this is the norm in our profession, but with Courtney's help, it doesn't have to be that way. I highly recommend that you check her out and take a listen, and I want you to enjoy the show. And if you find value in it, please share it with someone that you think may benefit. Welcome to the Guns and Yoga podcast. My name is Wendy Hummel, and today I'm going to be speaking with Courtney. She is a police officer and military spouse, and she's also a financial coach, and she runs her own business called Heroes Financial Coaching, And I'm really looking forward to this conversation. It's the first time I've had anybody on the show to talk about money and finances. And you're also the like second or third spouse that I've had on the podcast. So I'm really glad you're here today, Courtney, or tonight, I should say.
Yeah, thank you. I'm excited. And this is what I love to talk about. It's fun to me, which is not fun for most people probably to talk about finances. So I love it. And I love this community that I have been married into now and have gotten to join the crazy world of being a police wife. So
yeah, and we're going to talk a lot about that. But back to the comment you just made about finances, I'm going to fully admit here that is one of the things that I've never really loved is finances. And, it kind of lends itself to start out by saying, we can all be really kind of fit, like emotionally, physically, mentally, like with our wellness in certain areas, but maybe not in all. And so I really think finances is a big part of that. And I know that some of the things that you talk about on Instagram and on your platforms, maybe with your clients about financial wellness too, just that piece of it.
Yeah, it's funny. I was getting a massage not too long ago, and my masseuse, I was mentioning what I do, and she said, wow, that must be like a hard job because a lot of people don't want to talk about their finances, and it's not something that's obvious. Like if you're out of shape, it's obvious to the world you're out of shape, right? Right. For the most part. But when it's your money, like that's a very private thing. And a lot of people like don't want to have that conversation. And so it's funny because to me, like, I love this and I enjoy it and it's natural. I've talked about money with anybody for years. And so it's just funny to hear like from some people like, oh yeah, I didn't realize like that is a very private thing to some people. And something that you can easily hide and nobody would know something wrong. Same probably with like mental health wellness. Like it's easy to hide behind like this mask of everything's okay. And it's not. It's the same thing with our finances. Like, you can use credit cards and look very rich and be into debt up to your eyeballs and look like you're doing great. But also be super stressed out about your money. And so, yeah, I enjoy this because I enjoy getting rid of the stress, in people's finances, especially in this world.
Yeah. And it's really important for somebody to be helping families with this sort of thing. And especially because you can relate, like you said, because you are a first responder and military wife. So if we could just kind of have you tell us a little bit about your background, like what, I know when we talked before, we talked a couple of weeks ago about your background and just a little bit about what it's been like for you to be a spouse of a police officer and someone who served in the military.
Yeah, well, I'll just give you like the background of how I came into this life a little bit and then maybe into the financial side of it too. But I actually was a teacher in Southern California. I taught first grade and loved the sunshine and met my husband on eHarmony of all places.
Wow. Okay.
I know. And he was stationed in Fairbanks, Alaska in the Army. So like complete opposites of where I was from. Like that's not even attached to the US, And so when we got married, I moved up there in the middle of winter. It was like December 18th, closest to like the darkest day of the year with about 3 hours of sunlight, from like sunny Southern California up to that polar opposite world. And yeah, it was just crazy walking into something I had never known. My family was not military, like great grandpa was, but not immediate family. And not in the first responder world either. And so it just brought on like a whole different type of life that I didn't know. Like my dad was always home growing up, in the evenings. Then I married somebody who was either deployed or gone for training for half of the first 3 years of our marriage.
Oh, wow.
And so, yeah, just a very different life I walked into that I don't think I knew. Or understood. I was close friends with a military family before we got married, and saw a little bit of what it was like, but we didn't have kids yet. And so I was alone in Alaska for about a year and a half, the first 3 years of our marriage. And so, yeah, it was really cool opportunities to serve from a different perspective, I guess. Like everybody, looks at our first responders, military, and knows that they're sacrificing and serving. And it's easy as a spouse to forget that, like, we're doing that too, just from a different perspective. As we get to encourage our spouse, as we care for them, make them meals when they're deployed, whatever it looks like just being there as a support person to help them in that journey, I guess. And so as we were up there, part of the financial journey is going to come into this too. We came and got, I think my husband was making like $1,200 a month when we got married. It was nothing. Mm-hmm. And we took out our first car loan while we were up there and bought a big truck, which is so military and cops probably do that. No matter how much money you make, you're going to buy the big truck.
Right. And you're going to get a new one like every couple of years too.
Yes. Or every few months, depending on the person.
Right.
And so we got our first car loan, even though we were making nothing. And I had not quite gotten a job yet at that point because I just moved up there and was just trying to adjust to life. And at first, just started to realize, wow, this is heavy. We don't make very much income. Mm-hmm. We have rent. We have our normal bills, trying to manage our money together. And enjoy life. And we found that we were really stressed about our finances. And so I did get a job. I started teaching preschool for a little while. And I kind of enjoyed that. It was Alaska, -20. The kids would play outside until -20 there.
Whoa.
It's just crazy. So I'm outside with my parka on and snow pants and
you're from California.
Yes, it was a whole different world. But we started seeing we have this extra money coming in, which was a huge blessing. And we were really financially, we would have been doing okay if we would have had a plan for our money. And the problem though, is that we didn't have a good plan and we didn't stick to the somewhat of a plan that we had either. And so again, just causing stress for me, a lot of worry about our finances. We would have credit cards and just keep racking up the debt is what happened.
Right.
And so that really just added into the stress. So when my husband did deploy eventually, he went to Afghanistan for 8 months and we took that time and I worked full time at that point because he was gone anyway. And so I figured if he's not going to be home, I'm just going to work my butt off.
Right.
Mm-hmm. And we got separation pay when he was away. It's kind of how the military works. You get extra hazard duty pay and things too. So we took all that money and were able to pay off about $17,000 of credit card debt in just a few months. And then
good for you.
Yeah, it was amazing. And then a few months later, we were able to pay off my car and we're very close to being debt free. And then our first little guy was born and I stopped working at that point because my husband was about ready to get out of the Army and transition into police life, which then was, again, another pay cut, which is crazy thinking of the amount of sacrifice our first responders give and the danger they put themselves in to make such a low income in most places. And so we kind of went back into, in order to just pay the bills without me having to send our kid to childcare, because at that point I wouldn't even be making enough to cover the childcare. Teachers where I'm from make such little income, it actually wouldn't have even offset the cost. And then I would never have seen my husband because he was working nights.
My husband and I had a similar conversation. I was a first responder. Obviously he was too. And when we had our kids and they were getting ready to go to daycare, it's like a car payment, it's like a house payment. And so there was some serious conversation when I was about 9 years into my career, do I leave? What should I do? Plus my girls were premature, both of them. And so there was that too. So I can see that. That's why I think it is actually smart for a lot of first responder families, for that person who may have been working outside the home to not. And everybody makes decisions for different reasons, but we seriously contemplated the same exact thing. because we spent a lot of money on daycare.
Yeah. And it's crazy. I mean, I see people for one child dishing out over $1,000 a month for daycare.
Yep. And if you want it to be good quality daycare, you've got to pay more money for it typically.
Yeah. And so, yeah, for us, we just decided at that point, like, I was not going to go back to work, at least out of the home. And my husband, again, took a pay cut at that time. And so in order to just live, we were using credit cards again. We didn't rack up a lot of debt, but we're able to finally like sit down together and kind of figure out a plan to make this work for us. And we were able to pay off our debt and actually have like money in an emergency fund for us to where next time the tires, went flat on the car, we didn't have to use a credit card.
Sure. Yeah.
We're just able to pay for it in cash and get to a place to where we could feel comfortable about actually like sticking to a plan and living a better quality life. Because when we were in the military, when my husband was, we missed out on so much fun stuff that we could have done in Alaska, like the chartered fishing trips. I mean, those are world-class. People travel there to do that stuff. We couldn't afford it because we were not wise with our money then. And so looking back, we just saw, wow, all these missed opportunities for us. And then walking into this lifestyle now as a police wife, which I personally feel for us has been way more stressful than the military life.
Why do you think that is? Or why is it that way for you?
I think for me, when my husband was in the military, when he came home from deployment, it was a safe place. Like there wasn't an active threat on his life. I never felt in danger as a military spouse if somebody were to find out where we lived, things like that. Whereas in this community, if my husband arrests somebody and they get out of jail and want to try to find him, it puts our family in a different amount of danger. Right. He is constantly walking into danger every day. When they're in the military, they don't wear a bulletproof vest to work every day when they are, at home. And so for me, just this knowledge of, wow, like there's so much more risk involved here than what I knew. And then from the trauma side of what they see almost daily, for me was heartbreaking. Coming to of like, we had our first kid. My husband was in the academy right after, got out of the academy. We had our second right as 2020 hit, and all the protests that happened.
Oh, wow.
In our state, like we're in Idaho and it's not, it wasn't bad compared to most states. It wasn't Portland. It wasn't Seattle, but still there were people yelling at my husband to like go kill himself right as the day before, like I'm having my baby. And so he got off work, working 15-hour shifts for 5 days straight, handling these protests. The next morning we woke up, went to the hospital for us to have our baby. And so, I think that world I entered into, maybe too, because of the year that it happened to be that he became a cop, just showed me a whole new side, I think, of what police work really is. And then being there, like, as the support for my husband to encourage him and try to love him when people hated him. Was something like I never thought people could hate someone as much as they hated the police.
Yeah. And what you're saying is so important for people. I mean, those of us that are in this life, we know this, but like there's so many people that don't really understand, like what you just said, there's so many layers to it. So not only are you talking about how challenging it was for your husband, but then the people that are at home, I mean, I think I told you this when we spoke before, I call you guys the hidden heroes. I heard that before somewhere, I can't remember where, and it's so true. The impact of what this line of work can do to families and how important it is for you to be aware of it and to take care of yourself. And it sounds like that you guys are both pretty aware of all of these things, at least just from the conversations I've had with you. So, but it is like people don't really understand the impact that it has on families in our culture.
Yeah. And I think where I'm at, like, I did not feel a presence of the police spouses, like joining in together to be there as a support for one another. I felt very alone in that time. partially too, I'm sure, because it was COVID. And so a lot of people weren't going around other people. And yeah, for me, like knowing how am I supposed to help my husband, like who am I supposed to call for help when I don't have anybody who understands what it's like for your husband to be hated and then for him to come home and just sleep because he's so emotionally worn out. So yeah, I think even like remember the first night our baby was born and we were in the hospital and I just, gave birth, which is an exhausting thing. And I looked over a few hours later and my husband's knocked out cold because of all he had been through for the past few weeks. And so like that just sticks true in my mind of how much like exhaustion can come from those situations. And then, how that then applies to us as the spouse who is then trying to maybe pick up the pieces and figure out what to do when your spouse is just brokenhearted. So yes, we walked through a lot of having to figure that out and like talking to a counselor and finding ways, even through things like your podcast now that we listen to, like breathing and like techniques for wellness to help your body like just come down off of that stress. And so, I walked through right after that. My cortisol levels were insanely high for years because of that. And I really link it back to that time of 2020. So.
Yeah. And everything that you're saying is just, I'm listening to you and I can see you obviously. And it confirms for me like how important including families is when we talk about wellness. Because my full-time job, I'm the wellness manager for an agency. And a big part of what we're really starting to put our efforts is on families.
That's
is
amazing.
Including the families, educating families, creating a family academy. And for the very reasons that you just said. And so for anybody listening who maybe that's not the case at the agency that maybe they're affiliated with, how important some kind of support system is. Because you said it, you said there really wasn't anything, at least that you were aware of. And I know how important, first of all, for all humans, community and connection is important. And a lot of times the first responder has that when they go to work, but the people at home may not unless there's some kind of, concerted effort to do that. So it's just so important for people to hear what you have to say when it comes to that, whatever that might look like. So
yeah, I wish our department would have had something like that. That would have been so helpful to be able to go and sit down with a group of people and kind of hear, well, what are like the tools to help you and to help your spouse?
Yeah.
And how do you manage stress when people hate your spouse, and you fear what could happen to them and all those things. So it that's super helpful. And I wish every department would do that.
Yeah. Yeah. And really on a national level, there's so much more of a trend now. It's going to take a while, obviously, for the push to really the awareness of, yes, we need to take care of the people that are doing the job, but we need to take care of the people that are supporting them at home, whatever that looks like.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah. So tell us a little bit now about, if you don't mind, about your business. And so we heard about your passion for money, which is a little unusual. You don't meet a lot of people that get really excited about the money thing, but why is it that you like it so much? And how is it that you got the idea to start helping other people with it?
Yeah. So the reason I love talking personal finance is because I found so much freedom when we finally got it under control. We were able to like live the life we wanted, which for us is in the mountains. I live in a log cabin, as you might be able to see in the background.
Yeah, I see it.
And we have elk in our yard. And for us, like that was just a peace of mind to be able to get away from the city, away from where my husband works, and just be able to take a deep breath, to be able to sit out on the porch and look at the sunsets. And just have like that peace of mind. And so the reason I love personal finance and helping people with that is because I think there's so much stress in this first responder community. I primarily work with first responders and military. And I just know the stress now because I've lived it, of what you guys deal with every day at work. And then from my side, what the families deal with the stress that comes along with the job. And unfortunately, I see so many people who rely on constant overtime in order to like provide for their lives, whether it's because their income's low or whether it's because maybe they spend too much and they're in debt. And so they're just trying to make the payments. But my heart is that money would never add stress to their lives, because money is simply a tool to help us to live the lives that we want. And I think it can become something that's all consuming to people. Like for me, it's consuming in a way that like I enjoy it. I find it fun. But because we have to use money for most things in life, I think what happens is that people then can get into the habit of typically overspending, not knowing where their money is going. And so they just feel really anxious every month. And what happens for a lot of people is they start out the month strong and then they run out of money before the month's over. And so then they're anxious, then they're picking up those overtime shifts, which then add more stress to their family, more stress to the first responder, because they're not spending that quality time together because they're just trying to pay the bills. And so kind of how I started my business was I had always been doing this, like helping friends, even like roommates after college, that we would sit down, we'd talk about the budget. I've always loved budgeting, because I think having a plan for your money just helps us to feel at peace. And for me, just getting rid of the stress of not knowing what's going on with your finances can cause, just so much anxiety for people to not know what's going on. And so if you can just even come up with a plan, and that's what I help people do, is just create a plan for their money so that they know where it needs to go each month. And then creating like a long-term plan just provides security. And part of that too is not just like the day-to-day budgeting type of things of, hey, making sure we pay the bills, making sure there's money for fun, to enjoy your life. I think that's huge, just having balance in, yes, reach your financial goals, but also do that by enjoying them. Like enjoy the money you've worked so hard to earn. Take that vacation, but save up for it so that you're not stressed when you come home from the vacation and you see the credit card bill. Right. And so I really find joy in just helping people to create some kind of system that just works for them. And it looks different for everyone. But that's what I do with my clients typically is we sit down one-on-one and we just really work out, okay, how much do you have coming in, what's going out, and then what can you do with the extra if there is extra? And if there isn't anything left over, how do we change that so that there is some extra money to reach your goals and like actually live a good life and not be worried about your finances?
Yeah. And I can imagine, you correct me if I'm wrong, and I'm just speaking from personal experience because money's always been a little bit of a stressor for me, that you might have to get through some beliefs, some limiting beliefs when it comes to money, or maybe the way people were raised, or there's got to be some things around that before you can even maybe move forward. I'm assuming you probably see that.
Yeah. And I think that is a huge thing is most people are never taught anything about budgeting, anything about finances before they leave their home. And so that's why I've seen like a lot of these young military service members who have like a car loan with 17% interest because they don't know any better. I think in the military, there is a cap on how much interest they're allowed to be charged. They've put those protections in place for a reason, clearly, because they were being taken advantage of. And I see the same thing too. Like if I drive past my husband's apartment, I know I'm going to see some very nice trucks sitting in that parking lot. And most of them are financed. And like the average bill for a car payment is about $600 to $700 a month. And if you're looking at those big F-350s, those are over $1,000 a month, probably. Which I'm all for people having a car they love, but doing it in a way that that doesn't make you worry each month about how you're going to pay for it. And so, I think the financial education piece of it for a lot of people, they were raising their parents stressed about finances. Yeah. I remember that growing up, like my parents argued about money a lot. And that stuck with me. And that kind of can even be like something that causes anxiety for me when I start to fear about money. And I think, okay, why am I actually being fearful? That's not my situation. Right. I'm not in that position. We've taken care of ourselves and we have created something that actually works for us. And so, that is huge. It's just the limiting beliefs of saying like, this is all I've ever known. I don't know how to do different, number one. And I don't know that I can do different. Like people want to do better, but they almost like aren't convinced they can do it. And so as a coach, I kind of come alongside and I'm the guidance, I'm the encourager, the cheerleader, the accountability partner checking in in the middle of the month saying like, hey, are you sticking to it? Are you tracking those expenses to see where your money's really going? And then another thing that like for me personally, especially in this first responder community is so big is just the preparedness side. And I think that's just not discussed enough when it comes to things like life insurance.
Right.
I know my husband's department, his life insurance policy there would be his base pay for 1 year. That's all they would give us if he died. And that's nothing. That's not even probably going to pay the bills because typically there's overtime that comes in or holiday pay or who knows what. But base pay is not very much. And everybody I've talked to so far, first responder wise, like they don't have any extra income, any extra life insurance other than what their department offers them. And so really kind of getting that nailed down of what that should look like for people so that their family is cared for in their absence. And how much like my husband knows that if something was to happen to him, he would be sad that we would be left alone, but he would know that like we're provided for a very, very, very long time. Like we would not have to worry about money.
Well, I think most people don't want to have those conversations. And again, I'm guilty as charged. I'm embarrassed to say it, but I'm going to say it because maybe somebody listening won't wait this long, but I'm older. I'm 54. He's 3 years older than me. We waited until probably 5 or 6 years ago to have just a will with something in writing for our kids and things like that. So along the lines of what you're talking about is having those difficult conversations about what if. It's not fun. I know it firsthand, but it's so important to think about that. And I think it also varies too from department to department, you know, what you have offered. Like I know federally, it was really good when my husband, before he retired, now it's not as good. My former agency, as long as you went through and had a physical and you were in decent health, you could get X like 3 to 4 to 5 times of your salary and things like that. But after you retire, which I know you guys aren't there yet, but after you retire, it changes significantly. Then, that's the first time that he and I had ever gone outside of what our agencies offered for life insurance. We'd never done that before.
Yeah. And I think most people don't know because it's so cheap. Like a term life insurance policy for $1 million for my husband is $26 a month. That's it.
And it's probably because of your age too, is my guess. I mean, it does get more expensive as you get older.
Yes. And typically you need less insurance as well as you get older because typically you don't have the young kids anymore and things like that. And so, I think for most people just to know, like you need 10 to 12 times your annual salary in life insurance to cover for yourself. And then spouses too. I've heard so many spouses who don't have life insurance, especially those who don't work outside of the home because they say, I don't have an income. But what they don't realize is like, you're providing all this care. You're providing typically the child care then if you're not working outside of the home for your family, which as we said is a large amount of money. You're providing like caring for your home. You're doing the things like cooking, cleaning a lot of times that you're doing so that when your spouse comes home, they don't have to do that. And figuring out like that amount, what I've seen in the numbers calculated is up to $100,000 is what that would be worth. And so for the spouses to be listening to, have a policy for yourself because even though you don't see a dollar amount on what you do, there is a dollar amount that is applied to it in your absence. The childcare, the having to have somebody who does the shopping or scheduling for your home or the taking kids from one place to another, like that means something, even if you don't see a paycheck.
I couldn't agree more. I mean, and even like that, you know, not only all of that, and I could easily probably scratch out how much I think all of that is worth. And I know you and I would probably come up with some similar numbers, but it's that emotional labor of just like always caring for everybody within the home and always thinking about taking care of people and it's really hard to put a value on that because that's something that's always kind of going on. It doesn't really ever shut off.
Yeah. And in thinking too, like if something was to happen to me, I don't want my husband to have to pick up the slack of me being gone and having to do all those things while trying to grieve, right? Because that comes with enough hard times of its own, let alone if he's then having to like clean the house all by himself while taking care of 2 young kids and having to meal plan and pay the bills and things that he doesn't normally have to do a whole lot of because I take it over. And knowing that like in my absence that he could hire somebody to come and take care of the kids when he's at work. He could hire somebody to come and do the house cleaning. And so, yeah, just knowing that like I am caring for him as well if I was to be gone. And yeah, it's not a fun conversation to have. I know for me personally, when we wrote our will, like I still haven't written the letter to my kids if something was to happen because I can't bring myself to sit down and have to deal with those emotions. Like we have our will written. If something was to happen, we know who they go to. But for me to have to write out that emotional letter to them is more than I can bear at the moment. So it's
I haven't done it either. If it makes you feel better, I want to do it. I haven't done it yet either.
Yeah, my husband wrote when I cried reading his. So I'm like, I don't think I can't do it right now, but I need to because if something happens, like I want my kids to know how much I love them.
Right.
So yeah, I think having those things like life insurance in a will and even an emergency fund, like these are all things that help take the stress out of our lives. To know an emergency fund too, for those listening who might not know, because it's kind of a weird term, it's just like a savings account for when things happen. Like when your tires go out or your dishwasher breaks, or maybe you lose your job and you don't have an income for a few months. Having like 4 to 6 months of your expenses set aside into a savings account just to cover when those things happen. But having all that stuff like really does give us like a peace of mind, which in this career field for you guys and for the families that I support, I think is so important because there's so much stress that comes from this job, this lifestyle already, that my passion is removing the financial stress to say, hey, you have all these things put in place. You have this money for if something was to happen to you, that you would be okay. And again, like in some states, like even the disability is not good. Like if my husband was to get injured, I think we would get 66% or 60% of his income. For most people, they can't live off of 60% of their income. And so knowing that we have this money set aside in a place that just like helps us to be prepared and gives us that sense of security in case if anything was to happen. So that's what I'm huge about, is just those things of like preparedness and then just like your finances on a regular monthly basis. So.
And I don't know, like if most of your clients are in the same state as you or beyond. I'm guessing you have clients everywhere, but you know, I think even just planting the seed to get people to even find that information out, like what is it in your state? What is it with your agency? Because I guarantee you most do not know the answers.
Yeah. We actually, a friend I grew up with, he was a cop, a sheriff deputy in California, and he was just killed in the line of duty last month. And he left behind a wife and 2 little boys and a third on the way. Man. I don't know their situation in terms of like life insurance, but I'm really glad they live in California because I know his wife will be well cared for financially in that state. In the state I live in, it's not the same. Like I've looked up what the benefits are to know, like she will be cared for with their health insurance, things like that. In my state, you don't get health insurance if my husband was to pass away. That could be departmental decision, but the state does not provide it. And so knowing those things and then preparing yourself for that potential situation that will probably never happen. But if it was, like knowing that you're not relying on a GoFundMe that might be set up to survive, I think is so important. And the same with disability. Like we know in our state, it's not great. And so we're prepared for if that was to happen. Because unfortunately, like in this line of work, that could happen. You could get injured. in the job or out of the job. You could get injured too. So,
and medical retirement is going to look different depending on where you are too. I mean, in some places it's very decent, and others it's not. So that's another thing to consider.
Yeah. And I think too, like, as you talk retirement, a lot of people have not learned to live within their means and with their money now, and they're relying on overtime. Once you're in retirement, there's not, and so learn to figure out, what is that monthly income going to look like? And how do I learn to live within that before I get to the retirement stage? And I know I have one client, and he's heading towards retirement, and he said, like, hey, I have like 100,000 extra in overtime every year. Like, I'm not going to be getting that anymore. Yeah. He's a firefighter. So it looks different for them.
Yeah.
But, yeah, he said, like, that's not going to be coming in anymore. And so, like, I want to make sure that I can live well off of the money I currently make and that I'll have in retirement, versus always like looking to the overtime to kind of fill that void or to have the extra. Kind of having a plan to feel comfortable with what you're going to live with at some point, that they're not having to go out and get another job for the rest of their lives, right?
Yes. Oh yeah. That's because I'm in that retirement stage. You and I talked about this before. And, it is a lot of people, the people that have done it right, that have planned, they're, because 50 is a young age in the grand scheme of things to quote unquote retire. Not everyone retires at 50, but a lot of us do. Most people who retire at 50, like me, go and have another job for a little while. But some people don't have a choice because of either medical or because they just weren't good with their money. So besides that one guy that you talked about, do you mostly have younger families, or do you have a mix, or do you have people that are getting ready to retire that you coach?
Yeah, I have a mix. So I have all my clients are older than me, actually.
Okay.
Which is kind of fun. And yeah, I think they're all like 30s, 40s. I have one who's almost 50. And then the other one that's heading towards retirement. And so, yeah, they're actually all older than me, not the younger families, which is funny. And I think a lot of that is because people have gotten to this point now in their lives where they're saying, like, they're sick and tired of feeling stressed about their money.
Right. Sure.
Whereas when they're younger, they're just trying to survive. They have the energy maybe to pick up those overtime shifts for a while. But as they start getting a little bit older, they don't want to keep living that life. And so that's when they come looking for help, saying, hey, I mean, that's all of us, right? When you feel a little pain in your life is when you start wanting help.
Of course. And I can equate it to anything in life, like with your physical health or your mental health, your financial health. It's the same thing. And I think what's so great about what you're doing, and we'll get to some of these workshops that you put out and other ways that you can help people besides if, just them hiring you right away, is that you are trying to get people to get ahead of it and to be proactive and prevent, being in a place where you do feel like, oh gosh, it's too late. I can't retire. I'm not going to have enough money. So if you don't mind, a couple things, if people are interested in what you have to say and maybe they think, oh, maybe I'll benefit from having a conversation with Courtney, how that works. And then also some of the other things that you were telling me about, like some of the workshops you do and some of the plans that you have to get this information out so that people can at least, get some of this education ahead of time.
Yeah. So I'll start with like the free education that I offer, which is like my blogs and my Instagram. Yeah. I have a lot of blog posts on like wills and setting that up, or life insurance and what that looks like, what your number should be. Because I really do want that information out there, whether or not people want to work with me, because I know the stress relief that can come from having good control of your finances. And so my blog post, I put out a couple a month, and they just give all the information on even like things that you should have in your budget that probably aren't in it, like car registration. Most people don't think about their car registration until it comes due once a year. But what if we planned in advance for that throughout the whole year and put a little bit of money aside so that when that happens, we're not stressed about it and it's not messing us up. Or Christmas, it comes every year, but most of the time we plan for it right about Thanksgiving time. And so instead saying, what if I set, $100 a month or $50 a month ahead of time so that when Christmas does come, I'm prepared and it's not becoming a stressful thing.
Yeah.
And so that's my blog, where I kind of send out that information. And then I do the workshops as well. So I've done one so far, which was a budgeting class. It was called Build a Better Budget, all the things that you should include, and then kind of how to work your budget, because a lot of us can create one really good and never stick to it.
But there's no follow through.
Yes. And I think we're all really good at that in lots of things in life. We have a great plan, but we don't actually stick to it. And so kind of some techniques to use, like the app that I use and love to help me be successful with my finances. And I'm hosting another class soon. I'll probably do a couple throughout the year, where I do these workshops, and then I'll probably be offering one soon too on like how to pay off debt and stay out of debt. Because that's what's holding so many people back in their lives.
That's a really good one. That's a good one.
Yeah. It's just like people stay stuck, whether it's credit cards, car loans, any kind of interest, that we're building and that's not benefiting us, is taking that money away from doing so many like better things in our lives. So those are kind of the workshops I do. And then the one-on-one coaching, yes, is just, we start with a consultation and you kind of just tell me what's going on. It's free. And yeah, we just kind of go from there and see if coaching is what you actually need. Some people, that's not what their goal is, maybe, is to have like the one-on-one support. They would rather do the workshops or things like that. But some people really just want somebody to walk alongside them in this process.
Sure.
Kind of like having a wellness coach or a mental health professional, right? Like somebody to sit there and listen, to help like give us a plan and the tools that we need to be successful. And so that's kind of what it looks like for a lot of people. It's like me helping them create a budget that actually includes everything that they need in real numbers, not saying, oh, I'm going to spend $400 a month on groceries this month, but I have a family of 5. Like that's probably not going to happen. Right. And then it's going to mess it up. And so that's kind of like my first step for a lot of people, is just really seeing where's your money actually going. And I'll look at people's bank statements and say, hey, did you know you spent $3,000 on eating out last month? Because a lot of times we don't realize what we're spending because it's so easy in this credit card, debit card world where we just tap our card now for a second and there goes the money. And we don't realize where it's going because we're not having to use cash anymore and actually like count it out. And so, yeah, that's a lot of what I do, is I just sit down and go, okay, well, this is how much you spent here. Is that aligned with your goals? And if it does, great, keep doing it. And if it doesn't, let's see how we can change that a little bit. I'm not going to say never eat out again, but maybe spend $1,000 per month instead, if that's something you really enjoy. Is good food.
Yeah.
And then
what
like
I think is, what I think, I don't mean to interrupt you, sorry, but I just, one thing that just keeps sticking out about what you're saying, is that, you mentioned it earlier, like this can be really private. People don't really talk about finances, especially if it's kind of a sticky subject for you. And there could be some shame around it too. Like, oh, I'm really bad with my money, so I'm just not going to talk about it, think about it, deal with it. So it's so just like anything else, like just shining the light on it, dealing with it firsthand, and then having someone like you to be able to walk alongside and guide you. It's just, I think there's so much in that we need to really start thinking about. If that is something that you struggle with, there's no shame in talking about it, first of all, and finding the right person to help you along with it.
And like understanding why, like there's always a reason behind why we do certain things. And I always tell my clients, like, you don't need to feel bad about your past. Like, realize what you did and like, let's move forward and change it. But a lot of times the reason we spend money really shows us kind of like the way we think about things and the way we handle life. And so for some people, maybe like they really spend a lot on clothes or something like that, or shopping, like just random online shopping. I kind of like to get even behind the heart of that. Like, why are you doing it? Is it because you're lonely at night, because your husband is gone at work and your kids are exhausting you? And so now you're just scrolling Amazon trying to find something to bring you joy. Or is the reason you eat out because it's convenient, right? Because you're so exhausted from your job and you don't feel like you have the energy to go home and cook another meal. And so kind of like for me, like getting to the nitty gritty, the deep parts of like why we do what we do, even with our spending, really helps to like change people's minds sometimes to say, hey, instead of the eating out, I'm going to grab some frozen meals from Trader Joe's and throw them in the freezer. That'll take me 5 minutes when I get home to warm up. But instead of spending $50 on eating out, now I'm only spending $5 to $10. And it's still convenient, still easy, and still gives me like what I need to feed the family, but also not to make it stressful.
So you're really more than a financial coach, honestly. You really are more than just like the numbers, the budget. I mean, there's a little bit more to what you do than just that.
Yeah. And especially like within couples, like I find it really fun. Hey, for this spouse, this is how you like to do money. This spouse really likes to spend. We have a saver and a spender always, it seems like. One that's more fun. I am not the fun one in my marriage. My husband is way more the fun spender. I am the like, hey, I could save every penny I ever had. And like really kind of trying to find that balance and helping people to work together. Because I think that's a huge thing too, like in relationships, that it's so easy to have your money, my money. But if we actually worked as a team, like how much joy we could have in reaching our goals together. And now, so I do a lot of
couples together typically, like when you hire, when they're family. Okay.
For some of my first responder ones, it doesn't work out that way just because of scheduling, because they have to go in or they work the days that maybe are the only days that I can do coaching. And so for them, like I don't require them to have their spouse there as long as they're having those conversations. But yeah, the ones that when I do the husband and wife together or the couple together, like it's really fun to me. Like I had one person say, like, I always feel like the bad guy because I have to tell my wife no. Like, no, we're not, like, that doesn't align with their goals. He's like, I feel like a jerk. He said, like, but you're actually helping your family to be successful. And the wife to say, like, man, that's really not nice of me to have to put him in that position, to have to always tell me, hey, no, that doesn't go with our goals. And so it's fun. Like, I love these conversations because it just opens people's minds to work together in a different way too. To say, hey, like we both have the same idea of what we want to reach, but maybe we're not on the same page of like how to actually get there. And so allowing that person who likes to spend saying, hey, here's your fun money, spend it however you want. And once you're done, you're done. So they feel that little bit of freedom, so that they can enjoy their lives while still doing like what matters to them long-term as well. So.
Yeah, it's so important. So important. And I think what would be really great and what we try to do at the agency I work at is even like planting a seed early on in the academy and talking to the recruits and ideally with their families there too about these kinds of things. Because like you said, I mean, if you're not taught these skills growing up and you're entering into, maybe it's your first real job, your career, your profession, how do you expect to, you just have to kind of figure it out, just like everything else. I mean, they don't teach you how to even balance a checkbook in high school. Now, maybe some high schools do, but I was never taught those skills.
Yeah. And it's so true. And that's like my heart is I wish every academy had that. And I wish the spouses were allowed to come too. Because I think
that could be a goal for you.
It is my goal. It's my goal to get into the departments at some point and actually teach this stuff. Yeah. So that, for one, just the preparedness side of knowing you have enough life insurance for me is like number one. If I knew that every first responder had enough to cover their family, I would feel like I accomplished my mission. And so, yeah, that, and then helping people just to like have a plan and succeed and feel good about their finances instead of worried about them all the time. Because over 72% of people say they're really stressed about money in our nation.
That doesn't surprise me.
Yeah. And I think it's probably worse this year with how expensive things have been the last year. And so, yeah, that's my heart and my hope is that people could take that away and say, hey, like I get to live the life I want to live. I get to take the vacations I want to take and still live within my means and still have a good life and not rely on overtime to meet these things, because overtime just stresses people out, I think, at the end. Too much overtime.
And it's so important what you're doing. And I commend you for it, because I know there are other people that do this sort of thing, but I think it's different, like hiring somebody that isn't familiar with the culture I think you're very relatable to people. You yourself, you're a family member. It's, this is your life. So you're living it right now. And so I think that's a really, like, that's an advantage that you have, and it makes people feel comfortable and wanting to talk to you about these things. Just like anything else we do in our culture, like the people that are most like you, like peer support wise, we're more likely to want to talk to those people.
Yeah. Yeah. I find great joy in it. So
yeah, I can tell just by looking at you when you talk about it. So,
and it's funny because as I've like walked this personal finance journey, I've heard like some of the bigger name people that honestly sound like jerks when they talk about money, and they tell you shouldn't enjoy your life until you're debt free. And I tell my clients, take a vacation in between, give yourself a break. Like, there has to be balance, especially in this world, this first responder world, where there's so much stress. Like, why would we make paying off our debt or having a budget stressful? Like, why wouldn't we make it so that it's actually fun and enjoyable, to where you can take those vacations while still reaching your goals? Yeah, it might take you a little bit longer, but who cares?
Yeah, and first responders like a challenge, so you can make it a fun challenge, turn it into that.
Yeah, so I like to find a balance, a healthy balance in how to do this successfully while still enjoying your life at the same time. So
yeah, that's such a smart approach. Well, Courtney, I kind of scoured your Instagram just to kind of see, and you have a lot of great content on there. So for the listeners, just know that they can check you out at Heroes Financial Coaching, right, on Instagram. You have a website, so a lot of free stuff. And then if they want to get a hold of you and have a conversation with you or find out more about your services, how would they go about doing that?
Yeah, you can either reach me on my website, which is heroesfinancialcoaching.com, or on my Instagram too. I'm always direct messaging people on there, having conversations about finances. And so that's another place that they can get in contact.
Great. Well, is there anything that we didn't talk about that you think might be important for anybody listening when it comes to anything finance, wellness, being a spouse and a first responder, marriage, anything like that?
I think just always that there is hope. Like, when you feel like you're in a dark time, whether it's being married to a first responder, military, whether it's your finances are a mess, like realizing it won't be this way forever. And that there is hope on the other side to change it. I think that's my message, is like knowing you don't have to be stuck. There is a way you can change it and make it better.
Well, that's a good note to end on. And thank you again for coming on the podcast. And it's been so much fun to talk to you.
Yeah. Thank you, Wendy.
I hope you enjoyed the show. Again, if you found value, I ask that you share it with someone, subscribe, and leave us a review. Don't hesitate to reach out with questions, comments, or suggestions for future episodes. And remember, we are better together.